Hi everybody. Today we're going to talk a little bit about our thesis identification. Remember that our thesis is a very strong statement, it's never a question, about what we are going to be talking about. It is essentially the point that we're trying to make in our paper, be it a persuasive paper, an informative paper, an expository paper. It is the statement that indicates what it is that we're going to convince our audience of. And it kind of serves as the backbone of our entire paper, and everything that we write will actually tie back into and support a part of that thesis statement. Okay, so let's look at MindEdge and see what steps we can take to make identifying our thesis, composing our thesis, just a little bit easier on us. This week in MindEdge we have 5.3 activity thesis identification, and it's much like many of our other activities in which we have our prompts that will help us compose the final entity. In this case, it's going to be our thesis statement. Unlike some of our other assignments, you do not have to write a full 5-sentence paragraph for these, because we're actually constructing a thesis statement that's only 1 to 2 sentences. But still, to help us think and clarify our thoughts a little bit, it is beneficial to answer the prompts with full sentences. You don't have to do a full paragraph for these, but let's try and compose full sentences for our answers. All right, let's take a look at our prompt questions. All of these prompts are going to help us build a solid thesis statement. I want you to remember that a thesis statement is a statement. It is never a question. And we want to be fairly specific. And we don't want our audience trying to guess what we're talking about. We want to tell them exactly what we're going to be talking about. And this is going to allow us to structure a really nice flowing draft that will support this statement. So our first prompt is, what is that work-related problem that you will be addressing? This is that idea that we've been talking about through the entire term. For my paper that I'm writing, I would answer this prompt by saying the problem that I'm addressing will be students using text lingo in classrooms. So just type in 1 sentence, 2 sentences, whatever, of what that problem is. And this is to help you kind of keep track of everything as we develop our thesis statement. The next one is, state your argument that addresses this problem. Now, this is something that we've been working on throughout the last two at least assignments that we've been doing, is focusing and honing that problem that we are exploring, focusing our argument specifically about that problem that we are exploring. So you can feel free to look back at your previous assignments and maybe look at my comments and see if we tried to work it out a little more, hone it down a little bit more. So for my example, for the paper that I'm writing, I would state, my argument here is that the use of text lingo in an academic setting, including in papers, is detrimental to a student's learning experience. That's what I'm arguing. That's what I'm trying to persuade my audience to believe. Okay? Because remember, we're persuading, we're not just informing. Although informing kind of goes hand in hand with persuasion, but we really want to make sure that we are phrasing our argument as a persuasive approach. The next set of questions focus on the key and major points that our audience should be aware of in order to be persuaded to your argument. They're those key ideas, those key points that you're going to use to support your main argument. And we've been working with this a little bit in the papers that we've been writing too up until this point. So for my first reason why my audience should be persuaded, what I'm going to tell them in order to persuade me, or to persuade them to listen to me, is the first reason why text lingo is detrimental to a student's learning experience is because it leads to poor or sloppy academic writing skills. Now, we also want to kind of think about where we're going to be using that evidence, because remember, we need to use the evidence from our articles to support what we're saying. So the next part of each of these questions is to say, this is the article that's going to support it, and this is the piece of evidence that I will be using. So you could say, this is just an example, of course, this idea is supported by, and put in the title of that article, and it's specifically supported when the author states, and drop a quotation right there that supports that key point. So these next 3 questions are kind of breaking down our main ideas. They're going to be reflected in the body paragraphs of our draft. So it's really important that you give some clear thought and connect maybe some of your words from your other assignments into really well thought out, concise key points. Because remember, we're not drafting our paper with this assignment, we're drafting our thesis. And our statement only needs to be 1 to 2 sentences long. So again, we do this for the next 2, so we have a total of 3 major points. My second major point to help support my argument is The second reason why it's detrimental to a student's learning experience is because the use of text lingo leads to limited success both with conceptual learning and with grades. And then again, I include the information on the source and also maybe a specific piece of evidence. And then my third major point, why my audience should be persuaded, is the third reason why it is detrimental to a student's learning experience is because it does not, see my typo there? That's okay. This is all a work in progress. Is because it does not prepare them. That's what I'm trying to say here. It does not prepare them for the real world experience. So we'll try that again. The third reason why it's detrimental to a student's learning experience is because it does not prepare them for real world experiences. Most professional jobs will not approve such casual dialogue or writing in their employees. So do you kind of see how with the first very thing was like, what is our problem? The second question is specifically stating what our argument is, what are we trying to persuade? And then the next three questions are breaking down our key points that we're going to use to support that idea. And remember, after you type your stuff in, you want to hit submit to be able to save that to your notes. And that's what this assignment is about. It's not about right or wrong answers. It's about creating kind of like an annotation of your own ideas, a note page where you break down your ideas and remind you exactly what it is that we're trying to do here, because that's what the thesis statement is. It's telling the audience exactly what we're trying to do. So after we write down all those ideas, now we want to think about it and kind of compose a single or two sentence statement to really kind of just concisely say, hey audience, this is what we're going to be talking about. Okay, and this is what's going to end up being what we call a working thesis. We don't really settle 100% on our thesis right from the start. We may tweak it a little bit here and there as we continue writing, but we want this to be the main working thesis that we're going to be working with for the remainder of the term. And again, like, we might tweak it and change the ideas just a little bit, but this is our main idea that we're working towards. So the thesis statement that I come up with is allowing students to use text lingo in academic papers is bad for students because it leads to poor academic writing skills, limits student success, and leaves them unprepared for the real world expectations of their career. Okay, so we have clearly state our problem and our argumentative stance. I'm saying straight up, it's a problem and it's not a good thing. These are the three reasons why. And now our paper is going to reflect that as we start drafting it. The first paragraph or two will be explaining why it leads to poor academic writing skills. The next couple of paragraphs will be explaining why it limits student success, and so on. So you can see how the thesis statement serves as the backbone. Okay, and of course this is just my example, and if you want to talk about yours before you submit it, let me know. I'll be happy to. Don't overthink your thesis statement. We do want it to have those two main components. Say exactly what it is that your argument is, and say 3 reasons why you support it. And in fact, in our announcements this week, we do have a thesis formula that we can use that is exactly what we just said. But I don't want you to stress about it too much. It's a work in progress. It doesn't have to be perfect this go around. We can keep tweaking it as we go. And as always, if you have any questions at all while we are working on these assignments, let me know and I'll be happy to help. You guys got this. It's going to be awesome.